everyone, today's video is a book wrap-up of what I read in January. The first book that I read was Beauty Beauty by Rebecca Perry. This is a poetry collection, and this one I didn't enjoy as much as I had hoped. I think maybe I just wasn't quite in the mood for poetry, but I wanted to finish this up and start off my Goodreads challenge for the year. There were poems in here that I really enjoyed, and I think that I will revisit this at some point. The second book that I finished was Zadie Smith's Swing Time, which is her latest book, and I listened to this as an audiobook. I wasn't a huge fan of this one. I don't think it's one that I would reread. I just didn't find it that memorable. It's about a woman and she's looking back on her childhood, particularly her friendship with this other girl. Some sort of scandal has occurred and we find out throughout the course of the novel what has happened. I thought there were some really interesting passages and aspects of it that I liked, but overall wasn't a big fan of this one. The next one I didn't really enjoy either, but it does get better after this. This was one that I had to read because I run a book club at work and this was the book that we picked. It was an advanced reader's copy of What Alice Knew by T.A. Cotterill. This is not the sort of book that I normally would have picked up. I think if I hadn't been reading this for book club, or if I'd been reading it for book club and just been a participant rather than running the club, I probably wouldn't have finished it. I had to make myself read it, and I had to really make myself read it. For starters, it's not the kind of genre that I usually read. It's a crime thriller. It's about this woman whose husband has killed somebody, but the question is, was it murder? Was it manslaughter? It doesn't seem like her husband's telling the whole truth. She's not a particularly likeable character either. I usually really like reading about unlikable characters. I like reading about art, and this is sort of set within the art industry, but I just thought that the writing was patchy, the character development was practically non-existent, that the characters were written quite inconsistently, and there were all these name droppings of pieces of art, and I think that can be done very well, and Donna Tartt is an author who I think does this exceptionally well in The Secret History, but the way that she does it is that she kind of isolates you because of it, and this just made me really annoyed with the author. Also, the writing of the main woman I didn't think was believable at all. I could tell within the first few paragraphs that this was written by a man. So not a huge fan of this book. I gave it 1 star and would not recommend it. One thing I will say in its defense though is that it was really good to discuss at a book club because everyone had an opinion on it, and I think there was only one person in the book club who actually liked it. So if you want something which is going to generate a lot of good discussion, then this is a great book for that. Okay, so it gets better from here. The next book that I read was a graphic memoir, and this was sent to me by a friend in New Zealand. Who, thank you so much, because this is just, oh, it's so good. This book was pretty much written for me, I feel. It's a memoir about Katherine Mansfield. So it's written in 2 parts, really, and it goes between the 2 sections. So you've got the parts where it's her life story, her memoir, and they are in colour like this. You've got bits about Katherine Mansfield's life which are in black and white. It switches between the 2 as kind of parallel between her life and Katherine Mansfield's. And as somebody who sees a lot of parallels between my life and my kind of my feelings about life and Katherine Mansfield's, I just thought this was absolutely superb. I wanted more of it. It just reminded me why I love Katherine Mansfield, and I was familiar with her story, but this was quite an inventive new way of looking at Katherine Mansfield. So I think this would be a really good introduction to Mansfield's life story as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. I believe that it is only available in New Zealand at the moment, unfortunately. Although you might be able to find a copy online. It is published by Victoria University Press. Next up was another fantastic book, and this will be no surprise to anyone. It's Homegoing by Yagasi. This has had so much buzz on BookTube recently. It's only just come out here in the past couple of months. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I'm not sure if I would recommend going for the audiobook over the physical copy, just because you've got different stories and it switches between them quite quickly. So if you're wanting to flick back, as I found myself wanting to do quite a bit, then I would recommend going for the physical book. And I mean, just how beautiful is this book design? It's just a masterpiece within itself. And then you've got beautiful end papers, the cotton there. It starts with two sisters. One is sold into slavery and one remains free. And it follows their descendants throughout time, right up until the present day. It's a very complete story, even though it's short stories. You get these snippets, and the only thing that I would say I didn't like about this is the fact that you would get kind of attached to these characters and then you would move on to the next one. So I'd like to know more about each of these characters in some ways, but I think what she's done with this novel is absolutely fantastic, and yeah, believe the hype. The next book just broke my heart, and it's so beautiful. It's one of these books where very little happens, but the writing is just absolutely exquisite, and I think that's what makes this novel. I just wanted to chew over each sentence. It was so beautifully done. It's Call Me By Your Name by Andre Ackerman. I can't recommend this enough. It was an immediate 5-star read. I didn't want to finish it, but I wanted to keep reading because I just wanted to immerse myself in this prose, and I was so invested in the characters. It all felt so real. I believe this is also being made into a film, or has been made into a film, that's coming out this year. It's basically a gay romance story. This young boy falls in love with an older man who is a student of his father's. It's set in the Italian Riviera. The atmosphere is so well realised, and you just feel like you're there. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. That same kind of feeling of oppressive heat and that kind of dry heat, being by the sea. I love books like that. I want to read everything that this man has written, because if his other stuff is half as well written as this, then it will be fantastic. So if you want a book with just all of the emotions, all of the most beautiful prose you will ever read in your life, I gave this 5 stars, and I think this will go onto my favourites of all time list. And the book that I read after that was absolutely fantastic as well. It was The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, and I listened to this as an audiobook. I would highly recommend the audiobook because it's narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is just... he makes the prose sound like song. I don't know if that's just because I've listened to too much Hamilton. There's something about the way that Junot Diaz writes and the kind of rhythm that he writes in and the way that Lin interprets that, and it's just a winning combination. I've heard great things about the novel itself as well, because you've got footnotes in it, I believe, but that's beautifully woven into the audiobook, and it doesn't distract from it at all. I absolutely love this book as well. It was really fantastic. Can't believe it's taken me such a long time to get around to reading it. It's a coming of age story of this young boy called Oscar, and it goes beyond a coming of age story. It follows him throughout most of his life, really. That's why the title is The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. He is Dominican, but he's also an absolute nerd, so he doesn't fit nicely into any boxes, and so because of that he is kind of shunned. He's a bit of a nerd, bit of a loser, at least in the eyes of his peers, and he feels like he doesn't fit in. I think one of the things I most enjoyed about this is all the little references to comic books and to fantasy literature, particularly the fantasy literature. Lots of Tolkien parallels and lots of mentions of superheroes and things as well. That really appealed to me as somebody who identifies as a nerd. I felt like this book knew me really well as an audience, if that makes sense. And I imagine that would mean that a lot of people who are watching this would also really love it. So if you haven't read this already, highly recommend. go for the audiobook. Lin-Manuel Miranda is an absolute god. Okay, so the final book that I read in January was a non-fiction essay collection, and this is The Good Immigrant. The essays in here are written by writers, journalists, television personalities, people from a real range of backgrounds, and it's all about their experiences and their families' experiences of immigrating to the UK. So it really comes at this topic from a lot of different angles, and I feel like it builds up quite a holistic view, because obviously every immigrant experience is different. These writers examine racism in their different forms and different kinds of oppression and prejudice. Quite a few names that you might recognise, but Riz Ahmed, who played Bodhi in Rogue One, the recent Star Wars film, wrote an essay in this. In short, I think this is a really important collection. I think that it has come at a really key time. I wouldn't say a good time, but it's what we need at the moment, and I think that for the current climate, this is a book that everybody should read, certainly in the UK, and so much of this also applies to the US, Australia, New Zealand, other countries. So those were the books that I read in January. If you have any questions about these or want to chat about anything that I've said, or if you've read them and have the same or different opinions, please share that in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! And so I'm doing my list of favourite books of the year. I read 100 books in 2016.